Good afternoon, all of you in Europe at least, and in the Middle East. Good evening to our guys in Asia Pacific, and good morning to all the good folks in the Americas. Welcome to our webinar today on the long-awaited release of Dime.Scheduler 2018. Some of you have been asking for this for a long time, so we are very happy to finally have this out in the wild. Today, will be three panelists here on the webinar, mainly Tom, our managing partner and also the development lead for Dime.Scheduler, who will bring us on a live demo through all the new features and functionalities in the application. We also have Dimitri, who will talk a bit about the future cadence of the future releases and release paths. And myself will guide you quickly through the new pricing and upgrading of the existing customer base. All of you are muted during the webinar. If you do have questions, please don't hold back. There's a questions panel on the right-hand side on your webinar menu. Please post your questions there. We will normally take them at the end of this webinar. This session is being recorded, and all of you will receive an automatic email delivery with a link to that recording. So thank you all for joining today. And with that, Tom, the floor is yours.
Unmuted.
Thank you very much, Nico, for the nice introduction. And also from my side, welcome to the Dime.Scheduler 2018 release webinar. I'm really very excited to show you all the new good stuff that we built, and I'll guide you through all the new features today, including the long-awaited project planning that will really change the way how you handle projects in the Dime.Scheduler. We will also talk about improvements on the map, in the user management, in the plan board, and much more. Since 1 year now, it's been since we released our HTML5 client, Dime.Scheduler 2017, at that time. And for the people that haven't seen it in action yet, I'm going to start with a very short demo on the plan process of a service order, before actually jumping into the big new features in 2018. But during that small demo, I will also point out some smaller improvements that we did for the 2018 release for the people that have actually already been working with the HTML5 client. So let's jump to our demo environment, where you can see Dime.Scheduler 2018 being started already. I'm going to start in NAV, as I said, with planning a simple service order. So I prepared one service order here at the bottom with one service item line, and which I'm going to send now Dime.Scheduler. So this is service order 130. I'm going to close that again and go back to Dime.Scheduler. As you can see, and as you are used from Dime.Scheduler, automatically the service order is displayed in the open tasks list at the upper left corner. When I will click this service order, you will see that the address is automatically shown on the map and that all the details are shown here in the task details pane. Also for this version counts that everything is completely customizable. So that means that all the fields that you see here in the upper left corner in the open tasks are, you can change the order, you can change the caption of it if they are present or not, change the grouping, etc., etc. So that didn't change in this version. We also still have the resource filters in place, resource filters that are automatically going to filter the plan board based on certain criteria like regions, like skills, basically everything you can think about. We have an example here. By clicking on this filter button, we are filtering all for the department service and for a specific region. And this is the result that you can see here on the plan board. What we normally do now is then plan the actual service order. So we drag and drop the service order to one of our resources, drop it here, and the appointment will be immediately sent back to the back office application, Microsoft Dynamics NAV in this case. With our URL functionality or links functionality, you can directly navigate to Nav by opening the service order from Dime.Scheduler, as you can see here. And just to finalize this short demo with the complete integration of Dime.Scheduler, it is possible to send real-time updates from the back office application to the plan board by clicking here to change the repair status to in process, for example. And you can see here that the color of the time marker changed from yellow to green. So that action came basically from the back office application from. So as you can see, there are no breaking changes in terms of users working already with the system. We just added functionality, but we didn't change or remove any existing functionality drastically. Some small things were changed, like buttons that have another position now, but really for the rest, the main processes and the main flows will be exactly the same as in the past. You might notice here that the Teams button is gone from the task details section because, well, we got comments that sometimes it was in the way of the text, so we moved it here to the upper right corner to the menu bar, where you can easily change again the styling of the application. Also on the plan board, we did some minor changes, I would call them. We applied a resource filter on the plan board during the small demo. Normally in the past, to reset that filter, you needed to go back to the resource filter section and click here on the reset button. That has now been changed. We added a button to the plan board where you can click and reset the filters. The only difference is that the filter will not be deleted. As you would click here, it would delete the filter. On the plan board, it will only reset the filter. So that means that later on, you could easily reapply that filter back to the resources. We talked about URLs. In the past, we had these URLs on our open tasks. A URL could be a link to the back office application. It could be a link to a SharePoint document, the customer website, basically anything that can be opened via a URL. We now also added these URLs to the resources. So if you right click on the resource header, you now also see the same URLs if you would have on a job, on a task, or on a planned appointment. So by clicking here, we can open the resource card, or again, any document that could be opened via an existing URL. If you look in detail to the plan board, see that for this appointment here, we added a new type of visual indicator, the red vertical line here at the left. So in the past, we had the category, which is the color of the appointment. We had the time marker already, which is the horizontal line on the appointment. So now we added a third visual indicator, which will visualize if there are existing notifications for that appointment. Just a small example, if somebody plans a service order on the plan board, the data is sent immediately back to the back office application, NAV, and it goes through the business logic of the application. But in some cases, it might be possible that there would be an error message. For example, if a certain SLA is not respected, or if the resource is not qualified enough to do a certain job. So you could check that within the business logic of NAV. In that case, you would like to send back a notification to the planner to say, hey, you can't plan this order on this date or on that resource. Sending back this notification, you will see it here in the notifications panel on the plan board. And now what's new is that you will automatically see here an extra visualization on the appointment itself. So you immediately know something is wrong with that appointment or with the planning. So if you click on it, you will see the actual message, the actual error message in this case coming from NAV. We have multiple types of messages. You can have an error, then the color will be red. You can have a warning where the color will be orange, and you can have just a pure informational message where the color of the indicator will be blue. All notifications can be seen here in this notifications tab. You can also link notifications, by the way, to tasks and jobs. So by clicking on one of the tasks, for example, you could also see notifications here. In this case, there's no notification linked to this open task here. Furthermore, in the plan board, we also simplified the possibility to change the height of the appointments. Like in my case here, I don't have enough resources to fill the complete space of my plan board. I could change the height of the appointments. In the past, you had 2 sliders here. We replaced that with 1 slider, where you can easily now change the height of the appointment like this. 2 remarks here. The height is now also saved into the plan board layout, which was not the case in the past. So if I would now save this, restart the application, you will see that the layout will be exactly the same as you have it now. And the second remark is that now also the text here in the appointment is wrapped into multiple lines of the appointment. In the past, you only had 1 line. Now we use all the free space to show you as much detail as possible of the appointment. Another thing that is now also saved into the layout of the plan board is the width of this grid. It's just a detail, but I really wanted to mention it. So if you change this, again, save the layout, this will now also be saved into the layout of the plan board. And might have noticed already, let me just select another date range. Now the weekend is also indicated on the plan board. It's gray, as you can see. That wasn't the case in the past, so as of now you can also indicate weekend days. Of course, we still have the possibility to change and to hide the weekends if you want by just changing your view to the work week view here. That will automatically hide the weekends and only show you the actual working days. So far, I would say the small improvements, they're much more. We don't have time today to run through everything, but these are the ones I wanted to highlight for you today. So let's go back to the current week and talk a bit about the map. Let me just unselect everything that was selected. Some really exciting new features we have here on the map. First of all, one new thing is that when you click on one of the resources and nothing else is selected, so no tasks or planned appointments are selected, you will see that the map automatically navigates to the position of the resource if that position, of course, is known in Dime.Scheduler. Now, also there, we did some improvements. In the past, you could track resources by feeding the coordinates, the geo coordinates of the resource to Dime.Scheduler from your back office application. If you had that data there, it could be coming from a black box in the car or an external data source. Now, there was a huge request from our partners to also geocode the home addresses of the resources and see actually the home address of a non-moving resource in this case on the map. So if you zoom out, you will see we have a couple of resources here. And if you go to our settings screen for resources, which I will open now, I will just open it in another tab so not to move around between the screens too much and not to lose time. So you will see here, this is the known resource setup screen that you know from previous versions. Actually, you don't need to change that much here since all the data coming from NAV. It's more for consulting and making small corrections if needed. You will see that we added a button here, the geocode all button, and some small buttons here, which will geocode a record by record. So if you have a home address known in your back office application and you send it over to Dime.Scheduler, by hitting these buttons, it will geocode the address and it will display automatically the resources on the map without doing anything else. So you just need to refresh your client and the data will be there. Geocode all will of course geocode all the resources. If you don't want to do it manually, there is one batch that runs every night that is going to do this for you. If you do an initial load, for example, it's always useful to just hit this button to check the results of the geocoding. If otherwise there are new resources added during the day, they will be geocoded at night. And as you can see here, we have all the resources present on the map. Now, if you take a deeper look on the map, you see that normal resource pin color would be purple. But you see also some other colors of pins on the map. That's also a new feature that we now added to Dime.Scheduler 2018. You can now define the color of the pins displayed on the map for both resources and jobs and tasks. I will show you an example with resources, as you can see here. So we have our resource Linda, which is orange. We have another resource here, which is red. What we did is we took over the functionality we had on appointments, categories and time markers. So we added basically a new entity to our indicators screen. So I will just go to the indicators setup screen. You will see in the past we had there categories and time markers. And now we added the pins to that screen. Pins can also be set up from NAV. Just to show you really quickly, if you go to the Dime Studio menu and you go to your filter group setup, where you also set up categories and time markers, you now also added pins. And if we navigate, we can go to the pin values where you can set up the pins and even the color. The color will also be transferred to Dime.Scheduler. So that means that you could link any entity within NAV to the pin and generate all the values from that table as being a code that needs to be sent to Dime.Scheduler that can be generate a colored pin, I would say. So it works exactly the same as category, time marker, and the known filter groups. So let me just close these setup screens and go back to the main planning screen. One of the things that already existed in the past since I think 2 releases ago is when you clicked on one of the open tasks and on a second open task, that it would calculate the route between those 2 points. So you would have the kilometers or miles distance and the travel time displayed here on the map. That could also be multiple points. So then you would have the whole route basically in the order that you selected it. One gap there was that you could never select the distance between a customer and a resource, which we now also changed. So when selecting an order, for example, this one here, you can now click on the pins also on the map to calculate the route. So my order is selected. If I would now click on Linda, you would see that now the route is calculated between my resource and my order. You can remove the route by clicking this button here and make a new route from scratch. So without selecting an order, you could say, I want to know the distance between this and this. So basically every pin that you have available on the map, you are able to calculate the routes between those two pins. Furthermore, we have, of course, the standard things that you already know from the past. We have the traffic information, which is still available by clicking this one. By clicking on the traffic information, you can see a bit more information about what's going on there. Sometimes it even announces how long the roadblocks will take, etc., etc. So that's it for the map. So we have the new pin functionality where we have the colors of the pins. You can now select the pins to calculate the route between specific addresses and your resources. And very important, you can now also geocode the home address of your resources to be shown on the map. Before I jump into the project planning, which will be the biggest part of this webinar, I would like to talk briefly about user management because we also did some improvements there. So let me just go to the roles screen because this is a new page that we created. It is now possible with Dime.Scheduler 2018 to set up your own custom roles or to change the out-of-the-box roles that we provide via this setup screen. So we have a planner role, a viewer, administrator, application manager, personalization role. Planner viewer, I think, speaks for themselves. Administrator has access to the administration menu. Application manager will have access to the settings menu here. Personalization will be able to create profiles, layouts, and filter sets, save them, share them with other users, etc., etc. And there is one new out-of-the-box role, which is the user manager. The user manager will have access to the administration menu, but only to the first three top menus. So the user manager will be able, as the name says, to create users and manage users. The user manager will not be able to create any admin users or see or modify any admin users. So it's just one level below. The user manager will be able to create normal planning or viewing users. As I said, you can now completely customize the roles that you have here, create your own roles. And by just, for example, we have a planner here. So you can see, you can assign user actions, things that you can do in the application to that role. A good example here is sometimes we get the question of our partners, can we block the creation of a manual appointment for some of our users? In the plan boards, as you know, let me just go to the plan board, you can drag and drop and create a manual appointment. So by customizing the role, you could block that. For example, in that case, you would need to untick the new user action, which you have here. And then you can assign the role or a custom role to the user at creation time. Then there's another new setup screen, which is called user-generated content. I've talked before about the user profiles, layouts of the grids, and the filters. So if you look here at the plan board, a profile will contain the complete layout of the panes that are visible, not visible, the width of the panes, and the height of the panes, etc. We also have the layout of the grids. As you can see here, this one is grouped and sorted and maybe filtered also. Some data. This is saved. This is in my default, linked to my default profile when I start the application. So during the time of working with Dime.Scheduler, a user is creating content for him or herself. And for that reason, we decided to add another screen where we can manage that content. For example, an admin user is working at the company, preparing profiles for everybody. And at a given point, the admin is leaving the company. That would mean if you delete that user, that all his or her content would also be deleted. You can now click on the user. Let me just take my user that I'm using now. I have two profiles here, some layouts that I created, some filters, and I can now manage that content by simply double-clicking on the line. You can change the name. I can change the owner. So that means that if I'm going to delete my user, that the content will not be deleted. I can make it public, share it with a certain user group. So all the things you can do at creation time of that profile also be done from an administration point of view. We also added to the users menu an extra warning that if you are going to delete a certain user, that some data might also be deleted that you don't want to be deleted. In this case, for example, this user here has a shared profile. If you go down, this one here, for example, has also a shared layout. So if you click on it here, you will see the user has indeed a shared layout where you can change the owner before actually deleting the user. So that's something I also really wanted to point out to you, that we have been working here on the profiles and the user management in general. Maybe one thing before I forget, when creating a forms user in the past, you needed to insert a password. That is not needed anymore. You don't see the column, it's disappeared. The password will now be generated automatically and shown one time to the administrator at creation time. Afterwards, an email is sent to the user who will receive a link where they can set their password. Okay, so let's now jump to the project planning. I'm going to log off with this user and log in with another user. This is our plan job user. This is the same database. It's the same application. It's just a user which has another profile. So you will see that the layout of the screen is completely different. It has another profile and other security settings. So the data that you will see here is also completely different. What do we see on the screen? We have our open tasks here. You see this is other data than we had in the previous session. Because of security filtering based on the filters that we assign to a user, you will see other data here. We have the plan board with other resources. So the same counts for what I said for tasks. Resources can also be splitted over multiple, for example, departments or planning environments. And here on top, we have something that is brand new, which is the project planning, where we are going to plan our project in the time. Afterwards, we're going to assign resources to that project, and those will be reflected into the resource planning and will be sent back to the back office application, in this case, NAV. So let's have a look in NAV. I prepared a project or a job, it's called here already. If you go to our jobs, I have one job here, which is the creation of the construction of a wastewater treatment plant. So if you look at the different tasks, there's a bunch of tasks here that we inserted. We have the equalization of the basin, the pump station needs to be constructed, the control building for that pump station needs to be constructed, and the surrounding environment needs to be also constructed, I would say. We sent this project already to Dime.Scheduler. So as you will in your open tasks overview here, you will see that there's all the tasks are here that we had in NAV. We can now display the complete project plan by right-clicking on the task and by clicking on the Open Project button. If I will hit this one, you will see that this will start to load. It will load the complete project. Let me just maximize that for the sake of the demo, so you have a bit more space on the screen. So what do we see here on the screen? Let's start on the left with our tasks. Basically, you see the same thing as you saw in NAV before. We have the groups of tasks with their child tasks, let's call them, for every group that was sent to Dime.Scheduler. Furthermore, we have all the tasks here one by one. Group tasks can also be planned. And of course, the child tasks too. You will see that you have the difference between normal tasks and milestones. I will come back to that in a second. You will have a bunch of columns here. As you can see here, duration and effort. I will also come back to that later because they are not specifically the same. But as you're used to Dime.Scheduler, you can add all the columns that you like linked to task entity. So all the columns you have in your open tasks can also be added here. The free fields can be added here. There are also some specific columns for the Gantt chart. For example, the start of the task, the end of the task, or for example, the duration, so where you can modify also the data. So if I double click here, you can modify the data of that task directly from the grid. If you look on the project planning itself, in the middle of the screen, you see we prepared it already a bit. So we created a bunch of groups and dependencies for that project. Let me just highlight the groups a bit so you can have a clear view on the stages in the current project. So we start with the equalization of the basin. Afterwards, we're going to do the construction of the pump station, but at the same time, for example, we could do the construction of the control building. And then we have the surrounding constructions. They can be done during the duration of the project. The nice thing about these groups is that you can move a whole group at once. So that means that all the linked tasks of that group will be moved along. You can see the arrow lines here between the different tasks. These are what we call dependencies. So one task can be dependent of another task. That also means that if you move one task, all the rest that is dependent on each other, that is linked to each other, will also move. So for example, if I move this one for a couple of days, you will see that all the rest of the tasks move along together with that task. So let me do that again, like this. That's because we put dependencies on every task, and it's, I think, a very nice feature. It's also possible to put constraints on some tasks. For example, on this last green task here, I put the constraint that it needs to be planned before, I think it was the 14th of January. If not, there will be a warning shown to the user. So if I would move this task 1 month, that means that the green task will end somewhere in February, which is too late. You will see that you don't get an error, you get more like a warning which says that the constraint will be violated, and you can choose what you do with it. So you can cancel your change, remove that constraint, or move the green task to the actual maximum date which I set up in the task itself. I will now cancel the change, so everything will jump back to its original position. You have undo, redo buttons here to undo and redo the changes. If you say I want to start from scratch, that is possible because in contrast to the actual plan boards where everything is real-time saved to the database, that is not the case with the Gantt chart. You can see these arrows here, the red arrows here. That means something was changed and is not synced yet. So you could make a plan or change one of the tasks and see what the result would be in all the other tasks without actually changing it back to the initial version by hitting here the reset button. In that case, the project will reload and you will have the project as it was before, since I did not save anything to my plan boards. Also for the tasks here, I forgot to mention, you have a search box where you can quickly search for some tasks if you need them. So these are all the tasks which have the text wall included, together with their groups. They are shown here. Okay. One thing also to mention here on the project planning is that you can split tasks, as you can see here. So we have multiple segments of the same task. So if I would right click here on this one and choose split task, you will see that this is now split. I can move this segment there, I can move this segment around. So the task is now split into multiple segments. It's still the same task, but it will be translated to the resource planning with these segments. So there will not be any work in this period or this period of time. If we right click on a task, we have also some options here next to the splitting of the task. We can delete dependencies directly from this menu. So by clicking on it, the dependency will be deleted. We have, of course, the task details as you know them, as you have everywhere in the application. And of course, also the well-known URLs, which we also talked about already today, where you can open the job card, for example, from here. And you have the edit task, which will open the editor for the task with all the properties that you have on a task. I will not go through all the properties today, but of course you have a start and end date and a duration, the effort. I'm going to talk in a second. Successors, you can create them from here, or you can create them via drag and drop, which I will show you in a second. Resources, you can add the resources to the task, and the advanced, where we can add a calendar to the task, we can change the scheduling mode, which I will talk about in a couple of minutes, etc., etc. Take some notes, so possibilities here. The last thing that you see here on the project plan are these kind of markers. These are deadlines. So it's just a visual indication of a date, and that date can mean basically anything you want it to mean. So that can be the deadline actually of the task. You could also move it here. It can be sent from the back office application. You can also just set it here directly on the grid here on the left side. And you could compare them to milestones. The only difference with a milestone is that a deadline cannot have any dependencies, whereas a milestone can have dependencies. So if I would drag and drop a dependency here to this milestone, you see these two are now linked to each other. So now if I move this one around, the milestone is moving along. So let's reset that again, not to mess up my data for the rest of the demo. Let's have a look at the different views. We are currently looking at a month per year view. That means that it's pretty zoomed out because we want to see as possible on the screen. You can have a look also in more detail. If you look on a week view, for example, you will see the detail per day level. Let me just turn off the marking of the groupings, not to confuse anybody. So as you can see now, we have our weeks here with all the days per week, which has maybe a clear, better view for shorter projects. The other view we had before is more for a helicopter view on the complete project. You can also see in the day view here when there are holidays planned. The weekend is also colored, so these are a bit more detailed. We also have a month view. It's basically the same, but with the header is a bit different. That was the week number before, that is now the month. The year per month, that's the one we shown in the beginning. And then we have the year per quarter view, which is, as the name says it, you will see per quarter the planning. So it's actually zooming out more than you did in the month view. If we go back here, we can also say, I want to set my range manually. So I would like to see September, this period, for example, then you will see 11th till the 27th. No scroll bar anymore. If you would click on a specific task, it will also automatically jump to that task and it will change the date range here. So if I click on this one here, you will see it automatically jumps to that date range with the same length of range. If you say, I want to see my whole project plan again, you can just hit the fit to screen button and then you have the start until the finish. Sorry. So that's it for the views. Now I would like to talk a bit more about the planning modes because that's quite important and it's a very nice feature of the Gantt chart. Let's move back to the whole project overview. If you look at one of the tasks, let's say this one here, this task has an effort and a duration which is the same at this point, 260 hours. If we will add resources to it via this screen, so let's add one resource to it, everything will stay the same. If we add a second resource to it, everything will stay the same, nothing will be recalculated. That is because the task is currently in a normal planning mode or scheduling mode, which you can find here in the scheduling modes. We have 4 different scheduling modes. I won't talk about all of them today, especially about the effort and the fixed duration. And I think the effort driven is the best one to show you today, because in case of an effort driven, the duration will be determined based by the effort and the number of resources assigned to that task. So in this case, I have 264 hours, one task. The effort is also 264 hours. And I added one resource via the editor before. You can also do it through the columns. I can add a resource here, Mr. Glenfiddich, to stay into the whiskey, and I will save it. You see now that immediately the duration of the task is the half of the effort because we added 2 resources to the task, and the task is effort driven. So that's what it means. It's going to take the effort as a base and recalculate the duration based on the number of resources you add. It can also be done vice versa. It can have a fixed duration, or duration driven, let's call it, and recalculate the effort based on the resources you add. That means you have a task of 10 days, you add 2 resources, then your effort would be 20 days in that case. So you would be over planning based on the criteria sent from NAV. In your resources, you can also set a unit percentage. That will also be calculated into that calculation. So if I would say Jack Daniels here is working only 50% of the time, you will see that the length of the task will be longer again because the calculation is based on the effort, so the duration needs to be adapted based on that. Okay, so let's talk a bit now about the integration with the resource planning. And I will zoom out my Gantt chart again. So we have the 2 on the same screen. As I said, we have calendars implemented into the Gantt chart, and you could see them very clearly when we went to the week view. You go here, you can see very clearly a calendar with the weekends, and also here this one has a holiday in between. So you can now link calendars as being part of the default company profile, I would say, a default calendar, which has the definition of the holidays, definition of the weekends, definition of the standard business hours. And special days maybe. For example, on Friday we stop working earlier. Could be a small example. That's a default calendar. We also have task calendars. So per task, you would be able to assign a different calendar. In this case, I assigned the calendar here to this task, I think. This task, yeah. As you can see, this task is taking up 96 hours, but in reality, it takes almost 4 weeks. That is because I added a special calendar here, which is weekend only to that task. It means that the working time is not set during the week, but only in the weekend, and that's why it's extending much more. So the length of the task will be recalculated automatically on the calendar that is linked to it. So you will see also if I try to change the length of my task, you see it's automatically jumping to the previous weekend, and it's jumping over that weekend. It automatically also updates here the duration. If you say here I want to update duration like this, 80 hours, for example, you can also do that. You can work multiple unit of measures. I can change this also to 5 days, for example, etc., etc. So a lot of functionality also there. Same counts for the effort. Now, based on that calendar that we have here, and let's take this task here from 6. So this one, we can now translate the planning of this task to the plan board after adding resources to it. So we could first of all start by filtering the plan board and to give us all the resources that are qualified to do this type of task. In that way, you will see in one glance that which resource has availability currently, which resource does not. You could change the period of the plan board separately from the Gantt chart, so you could look a bit later, because maybe at this time 6 till 12 they don't have availability. You need to move the task, but you need to find your availability first. So that can be done completely in the plan board. Now we can add 1 or 2 resources, so let's do that. In this period, we're going to add this Mr. Glenn, so we can do that here. You can just type and find as you type. We'll look for the actual resource. And let's go again for this Jack Daniels. One of the 2 resources, I will mark them as 50%, just so you see the actual consequences in the plan board when you do that. Let's click OK. So now we're going to synchronize the Gantt chart. That's the first time I actually do this today. So now we're saving all the changes that you did in your project plan, and behind the scenes the server will calculate and translate basically your planning to your resource planning. As you can see here, the appointments are now created automatically. They are pushed onto your plan board, and at this moment they are also sent back to NAV. So this is the first time something is sent back actually to NAV. As you see, what's the result in the resource planning is that per day, I should say, of that task, we're going to create an appointment based on the calendar which is linked to that task, or if there's no calendar linked, we fall back to the default base company calendar. As you can see here in my calendar, I had my business hours set from 8 till 4, and I planned 5 days with this task. Same counts for the second resource, but we inserted the unit of 50%, so only the half of the time will be planned on that resource, which is 4 hours in this case. If I would now move the task and save it again, the appointments will move along. If I delete them, the appointments will be deleted again from the plan board. Let's have a quick look at our calendars, just to show you what all is possible. So if you come into the calendar screen, you will see I have 2 calendars here, which is my company calendar. I won't go through all the setups, just point out some specifics. You can mark your weekends as working days, which I did, for example, with this weekend only calendar. You can set your business hours from 8 till 4. You could also set from 8 to 12 and from 1 to 5. That means that the Gantt, the project planning, is going to create 2 appointments per day on your resource planning, according to these business hours. You can set up day overrides, like holidays, company closures, anything you like. And on these day overrides, you could even mark them as saying it's non-working time or it's working time with modified hours compared to the standard business hours. You can set up special weekdays. As I said as an example, on Friday we stop working at 3 o'clock. So every Friday the business hours deviate from the standard working hours. And you could set week overrides. It's basically the same as a day override. It's just for a period of time where you could say the company is closed for 2 weeks, for example, or during the next 2 weeks we have changed business hours for one reason or another. We have calendar inheritance here. A parent can be, or a child can be linked to a parent calendar. That means for this weekend only, for example. I have special weekdays here where I say I don't work from Monday to Friday, only Saturday, Sunday, but this calendar is also inheriting the holidays which are marked here in the company calendar. So it's very flexible, and I think almost all the combinations are you can think of are possible. So if you look at the task and double click on one of the tasks, you can assign a calendar here, and the task will be recalculated immediately on the fly. Also, want to note out here the constraints which I talked about in the beginning. The constraint, as you see here, is we have all the types of constraints that you can think of. So you cannot finish earlier or later than a specific date. You need to finish or start on a specific date, or you cannot start earlier or later than a specific date. I showed you in the beginning how you could open a project by clicking on the open tasks list, right clicking, and then click the open project button. There's another way to open projects by hitting this button here. This will give you an overview of all your jobs that are suited to be planned in the project planning. So basically you can indicate in nav before you send over the job if it should be shown here or not. The nice thing about this one is that you can select multiple jobs at the same time. So that means that you can open 2 or more projects at the same time in one view. And then it gets really interesting, because the next step is that we're going to link these projects to each other and link multiple projects at the same time. So if we look here now, we have 2 projects. You see here the 40 and the 50. Those are my 2 projects that I have selected. So if I'm going to a month view to zoom out a bit, easier, we can say, for example, we are going to link the end of the last task of this 40 job to the beginning of the first task of this 50 job. And you will see, again, I get the constraint notification. I will remove it now so I can go along so you see what's actually happening. Now it will recalculate the complete project. And if we just fit the zoom to our screen, you will see now that these 2 projects are depending on each other. So that also means that next time when you open one of the 2 projects, the other one will be opened automatically together with it because they are depending on each other. So I think that's also a very nice feature that we can offer here with the project planning. One thing to finalize the talk about the project planning is that we can also show the critical path. If I hit this button, you will see here the critical path or what will have influence on the critical path. So that means everything that has an influence on the end date of your. So in this case, you can see here all the tasks that have a dependency until the end are part of the critical path. So you can see that. So if that means if I move this task here, that the end date of the project is in danger, and the end task will also be moved along with all the rest. A lot of more extra functionality here that I would like to talk about. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time for that, but I think you have a good overview already about all the features that we offer in Dime.Scheduler 2018. Also, some small things I would like to mention. We also shipped the NAV 2018 connector together with this version of Dime.Scheduler. And a nice more technical thing and good to know, I think, for the technical people here in the call, is that you can now also install multiple instances of Dime.Scheduler on one server. We got the question a lot of people that want to install a test in a live environment on the same machine. That is now possible. They can be on the same machine. They will use the same back office plugin to process everything going back to the back office application. Also, in our demos or our demo code in NAV, you will now find an example on how to use the action URLs to send emails to a customer or to a resource. So by right clicking here, I added an action URL, which you probably all know in the meanwhile. Action URLs are URLs used to perform a certain action in the back office application. I added this one here, and then we added a code unit in the NAV connector that uses the service email queue for sending emails to resources or customers, as you like. So that's it for me. And with this well, with this webinar, we also would like to take the opportunity to introduce somebody new to you, which is Dimitri van Heuken. He's working for Dime since a couple of months and acting in the role of product owner of Dime.Scheduler. So let me introduce himself and talk a bit about the future very briefly.
Muted. And hi, everybody. Thank you for listening. Glad to see that everybody managed to stay until the end. I'm happy to join Dime team as a product owner. That means I will be working on the backlog and new feature planning for the next versions of Dime.Scheduler. And for this, the first change we will make is that this release will be the last big on-premise release. You've all been waiting for about a year for this release, except for the small intermediate release. We would like to release a new version of Dime.Scheduler every month now. This means that, of course, you will get more frequent updates. If there are any bugs that you've reported and we managed to fix, you will have them by the end of the month. And if we have a new feature, no matter how big or small, it will go live immediately. That's for the release cycle in the future. We know you're all waiting for a few features. Some of you are missing. These are time slots, capacity planning, and recurring appointments. And I just wanted to note that these are the 3 features that are top of mind for us and we will be focusing on for the rest of the year. So keep an eye out for this and we will update you as soon as if we have something. So now we're going to talk about pricing. And for that, I'd like to introduce somebody you all know. That's Nico Stigger.
Thank you, Dimitri. And I'm very happy to announce that I have very few things to say about price changes because there are practically none. Let's start with the basis. You all know the base pricing of the product. Nothing really has changed here other than just the rounding of the subscription fees that had decimals, which didn't really make sense. The only thing we've clarified here is rather than saying a starter edition is 1 to 10, a team 11 to 50, it's just making it short that people understand it's a maximum number of resources, so it's not a tiered model. People with 34 resources don't have to buy a starter and a team. They only require the team edition. But I think most of that was already clear for you guys. On the exchange synchronization, nothing really changed at all. So prices here are the same. And then we're moving on to the advanced map. And there we have really been listening to you, especially on how it was priced. Most of you, if not all of you, know that we do work with a third-party vendor, PTV, for the advanced map features. Those strictly are third-party fees that obviously need to be paid for ourselves. In the past, we always included the maximum amount of resources for every tier for the map, which means if you were ordering a workgroup edition, you actually were buying the advanced map features for all 150 resources. Now we've decided to split it up, making it a lot cheaper for the end customer. If you do buy the advanced map now, within the license fee, there will be already a number of resources included. For example, for the workgroup, you will get 50 resources included, which dramatically lowers the price. If, however, the end customer does want more assets to be tracked in real time, then he can buy additional packs in multiples of tens of hundreds, which makes it a lot more scalable and affordable. Those basically are the only changes to the map.
Unmuted.
To the pricing, other than, of course, that you are getting heaps more functionality for the same price. So I think this is a major improvement. All of the new things that Tom has shown us, improving the project planning with the Gantt charts, are included in the base price. I'm getting a lot of inbound requests. Hey, Nico, how much is the add-on for Gantt chart or project planning, as we're going to refer to now? Well, it's free. It's fully included.
Maybe one thing to add here, Nico, is that the advanced map will now not be needed anymore if you just want to display the location of a resource's home address. If the new rule would be that you need to go to the advanced map if the data is coming from an external data source, the geo tracking data, or if the resource is actually tracked and changes it once within the 30 days. So if you just want to display the home address of the resource, as I've shown you during the demo, you can now do this under the basic licensing and no advanced map is needed anymore. Sorry, just wanted to add that.
Thank you for clarifying,
Muted.
Tom. I can see up to now we don't really have any questions in the questions pane, or we do, Dimitri. That's great. So I'll leave it up to you later then to handle those. Before we go there, let's quickly have a look at what happens to your existing customers. Well, quite simply, all the ones that already are on the HTML5 version or the Dime.Scheduler 2017 release, they can easily upgrade entirely free of charge to the latest edition. Also, their annual support plan will not change. It will stay the same. Customers, however, that are still on the Silverlight or 2016 version can also migrate free of charge to the latest release. We will just have a look at how many resources are currently scheduled in their live environment, and we will just issue a license within that tier or that fits that tier. Secondly, we need to look at utilization of the map. As you know, that was licensed separately, and yet the customer was supposed to get a Bing license themselves for that. In the new version, that is entirely included in the annual enhancement plan. So if your customer was not using the map before, and they will continue not to use it, we can remain on their existing annual enhancement plan. Nothing will change. If, however, they want to use the map, then we will issue a separate token and license for it, and they will move to just the normal list price as it is on our current price list. That's basically it. Good. Well, Dimitri, you did have some questions coming in. Maybe you can share them with the group, and we'll address them immediately.
Unmuted.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions actually. One is for Tom. Are the dependencies of the Gantt chart managed or persisted in nav or not?
Well, basic nav does not have any dependencies. So no would be the answer, but if you have a vertical add-on that does manage these dependencies, and you have them already at the creation of the project plan, you could really send them to Dime.Scheduler. That's not a problem at all, and manage them within Dime.Scheduler further on. So if you have the data, you can send the data, and it will be displayed in the project plan. But from a standard NAV connector, since dependencies do not exist there, we don't have that.
Okay, and one question, what happens if you update an appointment scheduled via the project planning in the normal planning board?
Unmuted.
Yep, I will immediately show you what happens. I think that would be the best way to show. So I have this appointment here, and I want to move it to another resource, for example. So that is all possible. You can also move the appointment from a day, but you need to stay within the boundaries of the task. So as you can see, if I want to move it here, that's not possible. You need to stay within the boundaries. So let me just drop it where it was. You can also remove appointments, so that's free to do whatever you like. Now, if the planning changes in the Gantt chart, let's see, task 1140 I planned on this order. Let me just quickly reopen one project. I think that will be a bit easier to visualize instead of having all the projects at the same time there. So if you now change one of the projects, so let's say we move this task a couple of days, you will you will get a message saying that something on that planning changed in the plan board. But basically the planning will be reset because we change the project in time. So it will reset the appointments from the plan board, and you will get the planning back on the 2 original resources for all the days that you are saving now. So if you save this, and in a couple of seconds you will see that planning, it will do some recalculation, and as you can see now, it's resetted to the original date and resource.
Muted.
Okay, that's all for the questions. So, Nico.
Well, thank you all for your attention and for attending today. We went through all the new features really in very high speed now today, and we are aware that there's plenty more to share. Therefore, Volker, amongst others, will set up regular webinars on specific topics. For example, how to work with the calendars, for example, in the project planning, how to work with constraints, how to work with inter-project dependencies. Those can all be short 15 to 20-minute webinars where we really pick one very specific topic. And we also intend to start recording those and build a bit of a knowledge base, if you want to, which we can share with all of you. Obviously, your input is very welcome for the topics of those webinars. The more recurring questions we have, well, the more likely for it to be scheduled in the very near future. Well, again, thank you very much. We hope you can be successful with the product in your next competitive deals. We really hope that you can, this will help to make your customers love you even more. And as always, we are very looking forward to your feedback. Since you are the guys showing most motivation, we will send you a surprise next week. You'll get the premiere of our new promotional video, which is ready for LinkedIn, which will help you to build and attire more leads for your planning and scheduling campaigns. Thank you all. Have a great Friday and have an awesome weekend. Bye.